Rain hammered against the window panes as I pulled into the driveway, the ghostly silhouettes of trees bending beneath the weight of the storm. My headlights caught the edge of the forest that bordered the old house, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and sway. Inside, the air felt charged, heavy with expectation, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I was here because of a dare, a challenge among friends that I couldn't refuse. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, my heart racing with each gust of wind that moaned through the halls. The sound of dripping water echoed, rhythmic and unsettling. I found a candle and struck a match, the flame casting eerie, dancing shadows against the walls. As I ventured deeper, the wood underfoot groaned with each step, whispering secrets of the past. In the living room, the wallpaper peeled like curling, dry skin, and the furniture was draped in dusty sheets. I pulled one off, and a cloud of dust billowed up, making me cough. A portrait hung above the mantelpiece, eyes seeming to follow me with a mournful desperation. I shivered, feeling watched, but pushed on, driven by an inexplicable need to discover more. The wind howled, louder now, as if it was trying to speak. I ascended the staircase, the candlelight flickering with each gust that seeped through the cracks. At the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched before me, doors lining each side. As I walked, the air grew colder and my breath misted in the dim light. I opened a door, and it creaked on its hinges, revealing a room shrouded in shadows. The window was open, curtains billowing like specters in the night. Suddenly, a voice whispered, just behind my ear, "Leave." The word hung in the air, a palpable presence. I spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. Unnerved, I continued to the next room. This one felt even colder, the walls damp and the air thick with the smell of mold. A child's crib stood in the corner, the mobile above it spinning slowly as if touched by an unseen hand. I felt eyes on me again, watching, waiting. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, and I jumped, dropping the candle. The room plunged into darkness, and I scrambled for the door, hands shaking. As I fumbled with the handle, a soft giggle echoed in the darkness, the sound chilling me to the bone. I finally burst out into the hallway, the candle retrieved and relit, my breaths coming in quick, terrified gasps. I should have left then, but something pulled me further into the house's heart. The next room was an old study, books scattered across the floor, their pages torn and yellowed. As I stepped over them, the temperature dropped sharply. My candle flickered, and in the brief moments of near darkness, shapes moved just beyond the edge of the light. Whispers filled the room, voices overlapping, desperate and angry. They seemed to seep from the very walls. "Don't look behind you." I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run, but curiosity rooted me in place. When I finally turned, nothing was there, just the empty room and the shadows. Yet, the feeling of being not alone was overwhelming. Pressing forward, each step felt heavier than the last. The final room at the end of the hall was different. The air was stifling, thick with the scent of decay. The door creaked open slowly, and inside, the remains of what looked like a ritual circle were etched into the floor, candles long burnt out placed at each point. I stepped closer, the symbols carved into the wood seeming to pulsate in the dim light. A cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing my candle once more, leaving me in utter darkness. My heart raced, and I reached for matches, hands trembling uncontrollably. The moment the light flickered to life, a face appeared right in front of mine, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. I stumbled back, falling over something hard. Scrambling up, I realized it was a bone, old and brittle. The floor was littered with them, a hidden graveyard. Panicked, I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. Trapped, I turned back to the room, and that's when I saw them all around, faces watching from the shadows, their expressions twisted in agony. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony that seemed to come from the very air itself. "Join us," they moaned, "stay forever." I backed away, hitting the wall, the cold seeping into my bones. As I slid down, the faces began to emerge from the walls, reaching for me with ghostly hands. Just as I thought I would be overwhelmed, there was a sudden, sharp noise from downstairs, a door slamming shut, cutting through the din. The apparitions paused, and in that moment of silence, I heard it, a child's voice, crying out in the darkness below, "Help me." The need to escape battled with the urge to find the source of the cry. My mind raced, heart pounding against my ribs. As I made my decision, the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my next move. And so, with a deep, steadying breath, I prepared to descend back into the darkened halls, towards the unknown horrors that awaited. Gathering all my courage, I turned back toward the darkened stairwell, each step echoing ominously in the otherwise suffocating silence. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of mildew and something else, something foul, like decayed flesh. I clutched the candle closer, its feeble light barely penetrating the darkness that seemed to consume everything. The cries had ceased, replaced by a haunting quiet that was somehow worse. The stair creaked under my weight, a sound that seemed to resonate through the entire house. As I reached the landing, a shadow flitted across the far end of the hallway, too quick to be natural. My heart skipped, and I paused, straining to hear over my own ragged breathing. A whisper, barely audible, brushed against my ear, "Don't look back." The voice was so close, so cold, it raised goosebumps on my neck. I resisted the urge to glance over my shoulder, focusing instead on the path ahead. The hallway stretched before me, lined with doors that stood slightly ajar, as if inviting me in. Choosing one at random, I pushed it open. The room was empty, save for a rocking chair that moved gently back and forth, as though someone had just stood up from it. The window was tightly shut, yet the curtains fluttered as if caught in a breeze. I approached, heart thumping, and as I neared, the rocking stopped abruptly, as though acknowledging my presence. I turned to leave, feeling eyes upon my back, when a child's laugh echoed from the corridor. Chilling and clear, it beckoned me onward. Each room I checked was more disturbing than the last, filled with old photographs of people whose eyes seemed to follow me, or toys that moved of their own accord. The deeper I went into the house, the stronger the feeling of dread became. It was a physical weight, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the flickering candlelight. I stumbled upon a room that was unlike the others. It was warmer, the air thick with the smell of incense. Candles lit the room, casting a sickly glow on the walls. In the center, a circle was drawn with salt, and within it, a book lay open. The pages were yellowed with age, the text written in a language I couldn't understand. As I leaned in closer, a gust of wind slammed the door shut behind me, and the candles flickered violently. The room darkened as the candles extinguished one by one, leaving me in the dim light of my lone candle. A soft, sorrowful moan filled the room, and from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was a woman, her face pale and gaunt, eyes hollow. She moved towards me, her hands reaching out as if in supplication. Her mouth moved, but the words were lost in a wail that rose and fell with the wind outside. Terrified, I backed away, knocking the salt circle with my foot. The air shifted, the temperature dropping further, and the woman's expression twisted into one of rage. "You are mine now," she hissed, her voice like the scrape of branches against a window pane. The door rattled violently, as if something on the other side demanded entry. I turned and ran, hearing her screams echo through the halls, a sound so filled with anguish and wrath it chased me faster. The house seemed alive, the walls pulsing with a sinister energy. Pictures fell as I passed, shattering on the ground, their subjects screaming silent curses. I made it to the front hall, the main door in sight, but as I reached for it, the wood splintered and the door slammed shut as if pushed by an unseen force. I was trapped, the reality of my situation setting in. Desperate, I looked around, noticing for the first time the staircase leading down to the cellar. The air was colder as I descended, the darkness almost tangible. I reached the bottom, my candle casting long, sinister shadows. The cellar was vast, filled with old furniture covered in dust sheets. As I pulled one off, a cloud of dust enveloped me, and in the dim light, I saw figures standing around the room, their features obscured by the dark. A voice, deeper than the last, reverberated through the room. "We've been waiting for you." Shadows moved, coalescing into forms both human and not, their features twisted in torment. I backed away, stumbling over an unseen obstacle, my mind reeling with terror. My candle flickered one final time before going out, plunging me into complete darkness. The last thing I felt was cold hands gripping my arms, pulling me deeper into the shadows as I screamed, my voice lost in the void. The darkness consumed me, a blanket of cold despair. And in that moment, I knew I was not alone, nor would I ever be again. As I awakened from the abyss of nightmares, my body jolted upright, soaked in cold sweat. The room was dark, eerily quiet, except for my heavy breathing. My mind raced, trying to discern dream from reality. But the chilling presence I felt lurking in the shadows wasn't a figment of my imagination, it was all too real. The air felt thick, as if saturated with unspoken horrors. I reached for the light switch, fingers trembling, only to find the power dead, the room plunged into an oppressive darkness. Groping in the dark, I found my flashlight and flicked it on. The beam cut through the blackness, revealing nothing but the familiar contours of my room. Yet, something was off. The air had a static charge, and the silence was suffocating. I strained my ears, listening for anything out of place. That's when I heard it, a soft, dragging sound, like cloth over wood, coming from the hallway. Heart pounding, I edged toward the door, flashlight poised. The sound grew louder, more urgent. As I peeked out, the hallway stretched before me, cloaked in shadows that seemed to writhe and twist. The sound stopped abruptly, as if aware of my scrutiny. I held my breath, waiting. Then, without warning, a child's giggle echoed down the hall, the sound twisted and malicious. "Come and find us," whispered a voice, as cold as the grave. With every instinct screaming at me to flee, I knew I couldn't, not yet. I needed answers. Who were these children? What did they want from me? The only clue lay in the heart of my terror, the abandoned house. I had to return, to confront this nightmare head-on. I grabbed my coat and keys, my movements mechanical, driven by a resolve forged from sheer terror. The night was unusually foggy, the moon a dim silhouette behind a veil of mist. As I drove, the streets were deserted, the fog turning my headlights into weak orbs of light that barely penetrated the darkness. Arriving at the house, the building loomed like a tombstone in the fog. The gate creaked ominously as I pushed it open. The house stared back at me, its windows dark eyes, its door a gaping mouth. I stepped inside, the air stale and cold, as if entering the lungs of a corpse. The silence was total, as though the house were holding its breath. I called out, "I know you're here. Show yourselves." My voice sounded alien in the quiet. At first, there was no response, Then, a slow clap echoed through the halls, mocking. Fear twisted in my gut, but I pressed on, moving deeper into the house. As I passed through the decrepit kitchen, the temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. The flashlight flickered as I entered the living room, where I first encountered the apparitions. The light steadied, and there they were, the children, their black eyes reflecting no light, their expressions empty of warmth. "Why are you haunting me?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. One stepped forward, her voice a chilling whisper. "You called us here with your fear and your curiosity. We are bound to this place, but you invited us into your world. What do you want from me?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. "To be remembered," she replied simply. "To be set free." "How? How can I help you?" The desperation in my voice was palpable. "Find our remains, bury us properly," another child said, stepping into the light. "Only then will we find peace." I nodded, understanding dawning. Where are you buried?" The children pointed together to the floor beneath us. "Below," they said in unison. Armed with a purpose, I searched the house for a way to the basement. Behind a false wall in the kitchen, I found a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air grew colder as I descended, the weight of the house above me pressing down. The basement was a catacomb of sorts, with earthen walls and a damp, moldy smell. My flashlight beam settled on a small, crudely dug pit. Inside, I found bones, small, fragile, unmistakably human. A wave of sorrow washed over me, tears mingling with the cold sweat on my face. I knew what I had to do. I worked through the night, carefully collecting the remains. At dawn, I drove to the nearest church, seeking help from a hesitant but compassionate priest. We returned to the house, where he performed a blessing and helped me bury the children properly in the local cemetery under a weeping willow whose branches swayed gently as if in thanks. Driving back to the house, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in weeks. But as I approached, I saw that the front door was ajar, swinging silently. I paused, a familiar dread creeping up my spine. The nightmare wasn't over. There was more to this than just laying the children to rest. As I stepped inside, the air shifted, and I realized the house still held secrets that were now mine to uncover.